The air in St. Patrick's Cathedral was thick with anticipation, the kind that comes right before a bride steps into her forever. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of reds, blues, and golds across the marble floor like a divine painting no one could look away from. Rows of polished mahogany pews were packed with 200 guests, their whispers blending with the soft hum of a violin quartet playing Pachelbel's canon in D. White roses and baby's breath spilled over every surface, their sweet scent mingling with the faint tang of candle wax. It was the kind of wedding Brooklyn girls like Aisha Washington dreamed of, even if she'd pieced it together on a teacher's salary. Aisha stood at the back of the cathedral, her heart pounding so loud she swore it drowned out the music. At 34, she was no wide-eyed ingenue, but in her carefully chosen wedding gown, a simple ivory dress with lace sleeves snagged at a sample sale. She felt like one. Her curly hair was swept into an elegant updo, a few tendrils framing her warm brown face, and her deep brown eyes sparkled with nervous excitement. She clutched her bouquet of white roses, the stems wrapped in a ribbon her kindergarten students had decorated with glitter and wobbly hearts. Her stepfather Robert stood beside her, his kind eyes crinkling behind his glasses as he offered his arm. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Aisha nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She'd spent months planning this day, scrimping and saving to make it perfect, even if it meant forgoing the designer dress or the five-star venue. James Bennett's family probably expected James. Her fiancé had sworn it didn't matter. "I love you for you, Aisha," he'd said, his hazel eyes soft as he kissed her forehead. "Not for what you can afford." She'd believed him. Why wouldn't she? 2 years of late-night talks, weekend brunches, and dreams of a shared future had built a trust she thought was unbreakable. The double oak doors swung open and the violin swelled into the bridal march. Aisha took a deep breath, her sneakers hidden beneath her gown for comfort, squeaking faintly on the polished floor. The guests rose, their faces a blur of smiles and phone cameras. She scanned the altar where James waited in a tailored black tuxedo, his blonde hair gleaming under the chandelier light. He was handsome as always, the kind of guy who turned heads in any room. But something was off. His jaw was tight, his hands fidgeting at his sides. No smile, no warmth in his eyes. Aisha's steps faltered, but Robert squeezed her arm. "Keep going, kiddo," he whispered. "He's probably just nervous." She forced a smile, pushing down the unease curling in her stomach. The walk down the aisle felt endless, the weight of every gaze pressing into her. In the front row, Margaret Bennett, James's mother, sat ramrod straight, her lips a thin line beneath her perfectly styled silver bob. Her designer suit screamed old money, and her cold stare screamed disapproval. Aisha had met her enough times to know Margaret thought a Brooklyn school teacher wasn't Bennett material, but James had always brushed it off. "She'll come around, babe," he'd promised. "You're my choice." Now, standing beside him at the altar, Aisha searched his face for that reassurance. Instead, she found a stranger. James avoided her eyes, his shoulders stiff as the minister began. "Dearly beloved," the minister intoned his voice, echoing through the cavernous space. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Aisha's heart fluttered. This was it, the moment she'd imagined since James proposed on a snowy night in Prospect Park, his breath fogging in the air as he slid a modest diamond onto her finger. She glanced at him, expecting a shared look, a secret smile. But James was staring at the floor, his knuckles white around the edge of the altar rail. The minister continued, "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The silence stretched heavy and unbroken. Aisha's pulse raced. Then, to her horror, James cleared his throat. "I need to say something," he said, his voice loud enough to carry to the back of the church. The minister blinked, startled. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, Mr. Bennett." "No." James turned to Aisha, his hazel eyes cold, devoid of the warmth she'd once drowned in. "I can't do this, Aisha. You're not enough for my world. This was a mistake." The words hit like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Gasps rippled through the cathedral, followed by a wave of whispers. Aisha stood frozen, the bouquet trembling in her hands. What she managed, her voice barely audible. James's jaw tightened, but he pressed on his tone, clinical as if he were firing an employee. "Let's be real. You're a school teacher. You live in a shoebox apartment. My family, my future needs more. I tried to make it work, but I can't." The whispers grew louder, a chorus of shock and pity. In the front row, Margaret nodded approvingly, her lips curling into a faint, satisfied smile. Aisha's vision blurred, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her throat closed up. The cathedral spun around her, the stained glass colors bleeding together. "James," she whispered, stepping closer. "You don't mean this." "We talked about kids, a house, everything. I've made my decision." He cut her off, stepping back. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." He turned, striding toward a side door near the altar, his polished shoes clicking on the marble. The inconvenience, as if her shattered heart were a cancelled dinner reservation. Aisha's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the altar rail, the wood cool under her palms. The guests were stirring now, some standing to leave, others staring at her with undisguised pity. She heard a woman murmur, "Poor thing, she's just a teacher. What did she expect?" Zoe Okoye, Aisha's best friend and maid of honor, rushed to her side, her braids swinging as she glared at the retreating James. "That spineless jerk." Zoe hissed, her voice low but fierce. "You okay, girl?" Aisha shook her head, unable to speak. The tears were coming now, hot and unstoppable, smudging the mascara she'd spent an hour perfecting. Her student's glittery ribbon felt like a cruel joke in her hands. She wanted to disappear, to run back to her tiny Brooklyn apartment and hide under her quilt. And then it happened. The massive oak doors at the back of the cathedral swung open with a thunderous boom, silencing every whisper. Framed in the doorway stood a man in his late 50s, his silver hair catching the light like a crown. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Aisha's annual salary, tailored to perfection, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the room with quiet authority. Two men in dark suits flanked him, earpieces glinting their postures, screaming private security. The wedding planner, a frazzled woman with a clipboard, scurried toward him. "Sir, this is a private ceremony." But the man was already striding down the aisle, his polished loafers silent on the marble. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their murmurs rising again. Aisha's mother, Ellen, made a strange sound from the front row, a half-gasp, half-sob, her knuckles white as she gripped her husband's arm. "Ellen," Robert whispered, concerned. "Do you know this guy?" Ellen's face drained of color, but she couldn't answer. The silver-haired man reached the altar, stopping just below Aisha. Up close, she saw his eyes a startling blue that mirrored her own, though she'd never noticed until now. His expression softened a crack in his composed facade. "Hello, daughter," he said, his deep voice gentle, but carrying through the church. "It seems I'm here just in time. I'm Alexander Montgomery." The name sent a jolt through the crowd. Alexander Montgomery, the tech billionaire, the recluse who'd built an empire from a garage startup. Even James, halfway to the side door, froze his eyes wide with calculation. Aisha stared at the man claiming to be her father, her mind reeling. She'd grown up with Ellen and Robert, a middle-class couple in Queens, never knowing her biological parents. Ellen had always said her father was gone, a topic too painful to touch. "I don't understand, Aisha," said her voice trembling. "What are you doing here? How did you even know about this?" Alexander's gaze held hers steady and unwavering. "I've been looking for you for 34 years, Aisha. My investigators found you 3 days ago when a local paper ran a story about your school's community garden. I flew back from Tokyo the moment I knew you were getting married. I had no idea." He glanced at James, his eyes hardening. "I had no idea I'd find you like this." The church erupted into chaos. Guests whispered furiously, phones flashing as they recorded the scene. Margaret Bennett stood, her face a mask of forced politeness as she approached Mr. Montgomery. "What an unexpected pleasure," she said, her voice syrupy. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding with my son." One of Alexander's security guards stepped smoothly between them. "Ma'am, please return to your seat," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Aisha's head spun. "Daughter. Billionaire investigators." It was too much, too fast. She sank onto the altar steps, her gown pooling around her like a fallen cloud. Zoe knelt beside her, rubbing her back. "Breathe." "Aisha," she said. "We'll figure this out." James, still lingering near the side door, cleared his throat. "Aisha, maybe we should talk privately," he said, his voice suddenly softer, his eyes flickering to Alexander. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding." Aisha's anger flared, cutting through her shock. "A misunderstanding," she snapped, standing. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. James, you said I wasn't enough, and now what, you want to talk? Because you see dollar signs?" Alexander stepped closer, his presence like a shield. "You're the groom, I presume," he said to James, his tone icy. "The one who just rejected my daughter for her so-called lack of wealth." He shook his head, disgust clear in his eyes. "Thank you for showing your true colors before she made the mistake of marrying you." James straightened his tie, nervous but defiant. "Sir, if I'd known she was your daughter, then what?" Alexander cut him off. "You'd have loved her more, been kinder. You don't deserve her, and you never will." The security team began ushering guests toward the exits, their voices calm but firm. "The family needs privacy," one guard announced. Within minutes, the cathedral was nearly empty, leaving only Aisha, Zoe, Ellen, Robert Alexander, and a shell-shocked James. In the sudden quiet, Aisha turned to her mother, her voice breaking. "Mom, did you know? Did you know who my father was?" Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Aisha, honey, it's complicated. Complicated." Alexander interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. "Is that what you call disappearing with my daughter for 34 years? Robert stepped forward, protective. "Let's all take a breath here," he said, his Queen's accent thick. "This is a lot for Aisha to process." Aisha nodded, her mind a whirlwind. "I need to get out of here," she said, her voice small. She looked at Alexander, then Zoe. "Can we go somewhere to talk? Somewhere normal?" Alexander's expression softened. "Of course. My car's outside. We can go wherever you feel comfortable." "Her apartment," Zoe suggested. "It's her space. No offense, Mr. Billionaire, but Aisha needs Brooklyn right now, not a penthouse." Aisha managed a weak smile. "Yeah, Brooklyn." As they left the cathedral, the late afternoon sun hit Aisha's face warm and grounding. She still wore her wedding gown. The train dragging slightly on the sidewalk, Zoe linked arms with her, leaning in. "Girl, you went from dumped to daughter of a billionaire." "In 10 minutes?" she said, her voice teasing but gentle. "That's some Hollywood-level drama." Aisha laughed, a shaky sound. "Yeah, but I'd rather have a boring love story right now." Zoe grinned. "Oh, trust me, boring's not in your cards. This is just the beginning. They piled into Alexander's sleek black SUV, the leather seats cool against Aisha's skin. As the car pulled away, she glanced back at the cathedral, its spires piercing the Manhattan sky. James stood on the steps watching them go, his face unreadable. Aisha turned away, her heart heavy but resolute. Whatever came next, she'd face it on her terms. Hey, if that altar betrayal had your jaw on the floor, stick around, things are about to get wilder. Aisha's world just flipped upside down, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What would you do if your wedding crashed like Aisha's? Let's talk. The rumble of the F train echoed through Aisha Washington's tiny Brooklyn apartment, a familiar soundtrack to her life. It was just past 6 in the evening, and the golden light of late spring filtered through her thrift store curtains, casting soft shadows on the hardwood floor. The place was small, a one-bedroom with a lumpy green sofa, a coffee table cluttered with lesson plans, and a fridge plastered with colorful drawings from her kindergarten class. The air smelled faintly of coconut oil from her hair and the jambalaya she'd cooked last night, a recipe she'd learned from a college friend in New Orleans. It wasn't much, but it was home, and after the chaos of her almost wedding, Aisha needed home more than ever. She sat cross-legged on the sofa, still in a pair of yoga pants and an oversized Nina Simone t-shirt, her wedding gown now stuffed in a garment bag in her closet. Her curly hair was loose, a wild halo around her face, and her brown eyes were puffy from crying. Zoe Okoye perched on the armrest, her braids pulled into a high bun, scrolling through her phone with the intensity of a detective. Alexander Montgomery sat awkwardly in a wicker chair that creaked under his weight. His pristine navy suit out of place in the cozy chaos, Ellen and Robert hovered near the kitchenette. Ellen wringing her hands, Robert pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "Okay, let's unpack this," Zoe said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Aisha, you got dumped at the altar by a spineless jerk, and then a billionaire strolls in claiming he's your dad. That's next-level soap opera stuff. So, Mr. Montgomery, spill the tea. How'd you find her?" Alexander cleared his throat, his blue eyes flicking to Aisha. "It's a long story," he began, his voice steady but heavy with something unspoken. 34 years ago, I was a young engineer just starting my tech company. I met Leela, Aisha's mother, at a jazz club in Harlem. She was a singer with a voice that could stop time. We fell hard, got married, had Aisha, but Lila got sick, cancer. She didn't want Aisha growing up in the shadow of my ambition, so she left. Gave Aisha to Ellen, her friend, to raise. I didn't know until it was too late. Aisha's breath caught. She'd always known she was adopted, but Ellen had been vague about her biological parents, saying only that her mother had passed and her father was gone. Now here was this man claiming a history she'd never imagined. She looked at Ellen, whose face was pale, her lips trembling. "Mom, is this true?" Aisha asked, her voice soft but urgent. "Did you know he was looking for me?" Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Aisha, honey, Lila made me promise to keep you safe," she said. "Alexander's world money power would swallow you up. I thought I was protecting you, protecting her by erasing me." Alexander's voice sharpened, though he kept it controlled. "Ellen, I spent decades searching private investigators. Dead ends. Nothing. Until 3 days ago when a local paper ran a story about Aisha's school garden project. A photo of her with her students popped up in a database. I flew back from Tokyo immediately. Robert handed Aisha a mug of coffee, his calloused hand brushing her shoulder. "Let's take it easy, folks," he said, his Queen's accent grounding the room. "Aisha's been through enough today without us turning this into a courtroom drama." Aisha sipped the coffee, the warmth steadying her. "So you're saying you didn't know I existed until now?" she asked Alexander, searching his face for lies. "I knew you existed," he corrected gently. "I just didn't know where you were." Leela was thorough, new names, new city, but I never stopped looking. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded photo of a young woman with Aisha's eyes, her hair in braids, smiling on a stage with a microphone. "This is Leela, your mother." Aisha's fingers trembled as she took the photo. The resemblance was uncanny. The same high cheekbones, the same spark in her gaze. She was beautiful. Aisha whispered, tears welling again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Mom." Ellen sank onto the sofa beside her. "I wanted to, sweetheart, but every time I tried it felt like betraying Lila's wishes. I thought I was giving you a normal life." "Normal?" Aisha laughed, a bitter edge to it. "Normal went out the window when James walked out on me today." Zoe snorted, setting her phone down. "Speaking of that loser, I did some digging while y'all were having your family reunion. James Bennett's real estate company is circling the drain debts lawsuits, the works. My cousin's girlfriend works at Meridian Capital. His main financier word is he's desperate for a cash infusion. Sounds like he was banking on something or someone to save his sorry butt." Aisha's stomach twisted. "You think he was using me? For what I'm a teacher?" "Zoe, I'm not exactly rolling in dough." "Not you," Alexander said, his voice low. "Me. Or rather my money. If he knew you were my daughter. But he didn't?" Aisha interrupted. "Nobody did. Not even me." Zoe's eyes narrowed. "Maybe someone did. I'm gonna keep poking around. If James is shady, I'll find the receipts." The conversation shifted to logistics. Alexander offered to arrange a private dinner to talk more, but Aisha insisted on staying in Brooklyn. "I need my space," she said, her voice firm. "This is all a lot." As Alexander and her parents left, Zoe lingered, pulling Aisha into a hug. "You're tougher than you think, girl," she said, "and I'm not letting that punk James off the hook." "We're gonna figure this out," Aisha managed to smile. "Thanks, Zoe. You're my ride or die." "Damn right," Zoe said, winking as she headed out. The next morning, Aisha stood in her classroom at PS 321, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of her kindergartners. The room smelled of crayons and apple juice, with alphabet posters and finger paint masterpieces taped to the walls. She wore her usual uniform, jeans, a colorful blouse, and sneakers, but her heart wasn't in it. The kids didn't notice, though, their voices a happy cacophony as they worked on a butterfly craft. Miss Washington, look, a gap-toothed girl named Tiana held up a lopsided butterfly glitter sparkling on her cheeks. "It's you." Aisha laughed, the sound easing the ache in her chest. "Me, girl, I don't have wings that fancy. You do too," Tiana insisted. "You're the best teacher ever." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Aisha turned, expecting the janitor, but instead saw a young man leaning against the frame, all swagger and expensive cologne. He was tall, with rich brown skin, a fade haircut, and a grin that screamed trouble. His Gucci tracksuit and Rolex watch screamed money, and the way he carried himself screamed arrogance. "Yo, is this the reading program spot?" he asked, his voice smooth as a radio DJ's. Aisha raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "This is a kindergarten class, not a club." "You looking for the community center? It's 2 blocks down." The man chuckled, stepping inside. "Nah, I'm in the right place. Malik Jackson. I'm here to volunteer, read to the kids or whatever. My PR guy says it'll look good for my image." Aisha crossed her arms. "Your image? What, you some kind of celebrity I'm supposed to know?" Malik's grin widened. "Not yet, but give it time. I run Jackson Enterprises real estate investments, you know, big money stuff. Thought I'd give back a little. Big money, huh? Aisha said, her tone dry. Well, those kids don't care about your bank account. They care if you can read The Very Hungry Caterpillar without boring them. Think you can handle that? Malik laughed, unfazed. Challenge accepted. Miss Washington, she said, turning back to her students. And it's Ms. Washington. Don't be late tomorrow. Mr. Jackson, kids, don't wait. As Malik sauntered out, Aisha shook her head. Rich boys, she muttered, always thinking they own the room. That evening, Aisha met Zoe at their favorite diner, a retro spot with red vinyl booths and a jukebox playing Marvin Gaye. The smell of burgers and fries filled the air, and the neon sign outside buzzed faintly. Zoe slid into the booth, her laptop open, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Girl, you're not gonna believe this, Zoe said, pushing a folder across the table. I hacked into some old email accounts. Don't ask how I've got my ways and found dirt on James. He's been working with Victor Kingsley Alexander's right-hand man at Montgomery Enterprises for 3 years. They've been tracking you, Aisha. Emails, photos, even notes on your teaching schedule. Aisha's heart sank as she flipped through the folder. There were grainy photos of her at the park at school, even one of her and James on their first date at the community center. The emails were chilling Victor, instructing James to gain her trust, keep her isolated, and ensure she never connects with Montgomery. Why? Aisha whispered, her voice shaking. What did I do to them? It's not about you, Zoe said. It's about Alexander's money. Victor's been groomed as his successor. But if you're Alexander's heir, that messes up his plans. James was supposed to marry you, control any inheritance, and keep you in the dark. Aisha's hands clenched into fists. He played me 2 years. Zoe. 2 years of lies. Zoe reached across the table, squeezing her hand. He's gonna regret it. But we need more proof. Hard evidence, not just emails. Aisha nodded, her jaw tight. Then let's get it. Later that night, Aisha and Zoe crept into the sleek Manhattan office of Bennett Realty James's company. The building was dark, the only light coming from the glow of a security camera they disabled with a well-aimed laser pointer. Zoe's idea. Aisha's pulse raced as they slipped into James's corner office, the city skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Keep it quick, Zoe whispered, rifling through a filing cabinet. We're not exactly James Bond. Aisha searched James's desk, her hands shaking as she found a locked drawer, using a paperclip, a trick she'd learned from a student. She popped it open, revealing a folder labeled Montgomery Initiative. Inside were more emails, financial records, and a draft post-nuptial agreement giving James control over any inheritance Aisha might receive. Her stomach churned. Zoe, look at this, she hissed. He was planning to lock me out of everything. Before Zoe could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Security, Zoe mouthed. Grabbing Aisha's arm, they ducked behind a couch, hearts pounding as a guard swept a flashlight through the room. Aisha held her breath, clutching the folder until the guard moved on. We gotta bounce, Zoe said, pulling Aisha toward the fire escape. They scrambled down the metal stairs, the folder tucked under Aisha's jacket, and didn't stop until they reached a crowded bar a block away. The neon-lit dive was packed, the air thick with beer and the wail of a saxophone. Aisha, still in her hoodie and jeans, felt out of place but safe. Blend in, Zoe said, shoving Aisha toward the stage where a karaoke mic waited. Sing something. It'll throw off anyone following us. Sing, Aisha, hissed Zoe. I'm not. But Zoe was already signing her up. Before Aisha could protest, the MC called her name. With no choice, she climbed onto the stage, the spotlight blinding. The crowd cheered, and she grabbed the mic, picking Summertime by Ella Fitzgerald. Her voice wobbled at first, missing half the notes, but the crowd didn't care. Clapping along, Halfway through, she spotted Malik Jackson at the bar, his Rolex glinting as he raised a glass, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "Nice pipes. Ms. Washington," he called, his grin wide. Aisha rolled her eyes, but kept singing, her nerves easing. When she finished, the crowd roared and she hopped off the stage, cheeks flushed. Malik sauntered over, still chuckling. "Didn't know you were a diva," he said. "That was something." "Keep laughing, rich boy," Aisha shot back, but a smile tugged at her lips. "What are you doing here?" "Slumming it," he said, shrugging. "Heard this place has the best wings." "You okay? You look like you just ran a marathon." Zoe cut in, dragging Aisha away. "We're fine, Mr. Moneybags. Catch you later." As they slipped out, Aisha glanced back at Malik, his easy confidence lingering in her mind. He was trouble, no doubt, but there was something disarming about him. She shook it off, clutching the folder tighter. James and Victor had underestimated her, but she was done being their pawn. Back at her apartment, Aisha spread the documents on her coffee table, her resolve hardening. "They thought I was too poor to fight back," she said, her voice steady. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." Zoe grinned. "That's my girl. Round two's gonna be a knockout." The community center in Bed-Stuy smelled like fresh paint and hope, a patchwork of dreams held together by duct tape and determination. The walls were plastered with flyers for after-school programs, voter registration drives, and local jazz nights, and the linoleum floors squeaked under Aisha Washington's sneakers. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and sunlight poured through the smudged windows, illuminating a circle of kindergartners sprawled on a rainbow alphabet rug. Aisha knelt among them, her jeans dusted with glitter from a morning craft session, her curly hair tied back with a bright yellow scarf. She held up a picture book, her voice warm and animated as she read, "The day you begin. There will be times when you walk into a room and no one there is quite like you." She read, her brown eyes twinkling as she glanced at the kids. "But that's what makes you special, right?" "Right," chirped Tiana, her pigtails bouncing, "like my glitter butterfly." Aisha laughed, the sound easing the knot in her chest. It had been a week since her world imploded at St. Patrick's Cathedral, since James Bennet left her at the altar, and Alexander Montgomery crashed into her life, claiming to be her father. The discovery of James's betrayal, his 3-year plot with Victor Kingsley to keep her from her billionaire dad, still stung. But these kids with their sticky fingers and endless questions were her anchor. The door creaked open and Malik Jackson strolled in, all swagger and expensive cologne. At 24, he was a walking contradiction, a millionaire heir in a custom tracksuit, his Rolex glinting but with a boyish grin that softened his edges. His fade haircut was sharp, his deep brown skin glowing under the fluorescent lights. The kids turned wide-eyed as he dropped a stack of new books onto a table. "Yo, Ms. Washington." Malik said, his voice smooth as a summer breeze. "Got some donations for the reading program. Figured these kids deserve the good stuff." Aisha raised an eyebrow, setting the book down. "Donations, huh? Or is your PR guy still trying to polish your image after that yacht party fiasco?" Malik clutched his chest, feigning offense. "Ouch. You wound me. Can't a guy just do something nice? Not when he rolls up in a Lamborghini." Aisha shot back, but a smile tugged at her lips. "Let's see if you can handle story time without boring them." The kids giggled, sensing a challenge. Malik plopped onto a tiny chair, his long legs folding awkwardly, and picked up the very hungry caterpillar. "All right, y'all, listen up," he said, flipping open the book. "This caterpillar's got no chill. He's eating everything." His reading was a disaster, stumbling over words, adding random sound effects like nom 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 that sent the kids into hysterics. Aisha bit her lip to keep from laughing, her arms crossed as she leaned against the wall. When Malik finished, Tiana raised her hand. "Mr. Malik, you read like my baby brother." The room erupted in laughter, and Malik grinned unfazed. "Fair, fair. Guess." I need practice. Ms. Washington, you giving lessons? Only if you can keep up, Aisha said, shaking her head. But as she watched him high-five the kids, a warmth flickered in her chest. He was cocky, sure, but there was something genuine beneath the flash. That evening, Aisha met Alexander at a hole-in-the-wall diner in Flatbush, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the jukebox never stopped. The neon sign buzzed outside and the air smelled of fried chicken and cornbread. Alexander looked out of place in his tailored blazer, but he'd insisted on meeting somewhere Aisha felt comfortable. They sat in a cracked vinyl booth, a plate of sweet potato fries between them. "I want to know you, Aisha," Alexander said, his blue eyes earnest. "Not just as my daughter, but as the woman you've become. Tell me about your life, your students." Aisha hesitated, picking at a fry. "It's not glamorous. I teach kindergarten, live in a shoebox apartment, and spend my weekends volunteering at the community center. My kids are my world. They're messy, loud, and perfect. That's me in a nutshell. It's more than enough," Alexander said, his voice soft. "Lila would be proud. She always wanted you to have a life full of meaning, not money." Aisha's throat tightened at the mention of her mother. She pulled the faded photo of Lila from her purse, tracing the edges. What was she like? Really? Alexander smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. "Stubborn, like you. Her voice could break your heart or lift you up, depending on the song. She loved you fiercely. Aisha, when she got sick, she made Ellen promise to keep you safe from my world, boardrooms, paparazzi, all of it." "Why didn't you fight for me?" Aisha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried," he said, pain flashing across his face. "But Lila was gone and Ellen disappeared with you. I hired investigators, chased leads, but you were a ghost. Until now." Aisha nodded. "Processing. I want to believe you, Alexander. But I need time. Take all you need," he said. "I've waited 34 years. I can wait a little longer." As they left the diner, Aisha's phone buzzed with a text from Malik. "Heard you're into jazz. Got tickets to a show tomorrow. You in?" She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering. Malik was trouble, too young, too rich, too everything. But something about his easy grin made her want to say yes. The next night, Aisha found herself at Malik's side, stepping into a swanky Manhattan penthouse for a charity gala. The place was a vision of excess, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and a live jazz band playing Ain't Misbehavin'. Waiters glided through the crowd with champagne flutes, and the air buzzed with the chatter of New York's elite. Aisha wore a red maxi dress that hugged her curves, her hair cascading in loose curls. She felt like a fish out of water, but Malik's hand on her lower back steadied her. "You clean up nice, Ms. Washington," he said, his eyes lingering on her, ready to mingle with the 1%. "Not really," Aisha admitted, smoothing her dress. "These people look like they'd rather eat their money than spend it on charity." Malik laughed loud enough to turn heads. "Keep it real, Aisha. That's why I like you." They moved through the crowd, Malik introducing her to investors and socialites who raised eyebrows at her name. "A teacher," one woman said, her diamond earrings glinting. "How quaint," another whispered to her friend. "She's too old for him. Probably after his money." Aisha's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high, sipping her champagne. Malik noticed his jaw tightening. "Ignore them," he muttered. "They're just mad. You're stealing the show." The band struck up a slow tune, and Malik pulled her onto the dance floor. "Come on, let's give 'em something to talk about," he said, his grin mischievous. He spun her gently, his hand warm against hers, and for a moment the room faded away. Aisha laughed, her nerves easing as they swayed to the music. "You're not bad at this," she said, her voice teasing. "Told you I'm full of surprises," Malik replied, his eyes locked on hers. "You're the real surprise, though. I'm used to people wanting something from me. Money connections. You don't. Aisha's smile faltered. Maybe because I know what it's like to be used, she said softly, thinking of James. Malik's expression softened. Whoever hurt you was a fool. You're worth more than any of this. The song ended and they stepped outside to the penthouse's rooftop terrace, the city skyline glittering below. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of the Hudson River. A small infinity pool shimmered nearby its surface, reflecting the stars. Aisha leaned against the railing, her red dress glowing under the moonlight. "Malik, why me?" she asked, her voice vulnerable. "I'm 10 years older than you. I'm a teacher, not some heiress. You could have anyone." Malik stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "Because you're the only one who calls me out, Aisha. You don't see my bank account. You see me. And I'm starting to see you too." He leaned in, and before Aisha could think, his lips met hers. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, then deepened, a spark igniting between them. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she melted into him, the world narrowing to the warmth of his touch. Her fingers grazed the back of his neck, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. Not James, not the whispers, not the 10 years between them, but doubt crept in, cold and sharp. Aisha pulled back her breath, uneven. "This is crazy." "Malik," she said, stepping away. "I'm too old for you." "This won't work, Aisha," he started, but she shook her head. "I need to go," she said, hurrying toward the elevator, her heart racing. As the doors closed, she caught his reflection, hurt but determined, and wondered if she'd just made a mistake. The next morning, Aisha was back in her classroom gluing googly eyes onto paper caterpillars with her students. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Dinner tonight. There's something important I need to share." She sighed, still reeling from the kiss with Malik. What was she thinking, letting herself get caught up with a 24-year-old millionaire? At dinner, in a quiet Brooklyn bistro, with exposed brick walls and flickering candles, Alexander dropped a bombshell. "I'm not well, Aisha," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I have a heart condition, myocardial fibrosis. It's manageable for now, but it's progressing. My doctors give me a year, maybe 2 before things get serious." Aisha's fork froze midway to her mouth. "A year," she whispered, her chest tightening. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're my daughter," he said, his blue eyes intense. "And my heir. Montgomery Enterprises is worth billions, and I want you to have a say in its future. Victor Kingsley, my VP, has been my presumed successor, but finding you changes everything." Aisha shook her head, overwhelmed. "Alexander, I'm a teacher. I don't know anything about running a company." "You don't have to," he said. "You can appoint executives, guide the vision. It's about legacy, not logistics." As they left the bistro, Aisha's mind raced heir to a billion-dollar empire. It was absurd, but the weight of Alexander's words and the ticking clock of his health settled heavily on her shoulders. Unbeknownst to her, across town, Victor Kingsley sat in a dimly lit office, his sharp features illuminated by a laptop screen. A photo of Aisha flashed on it, taken that night at the gala. "She's becoming a problem," he said to a shadowy figure on the phone. "We need to move faster. Hire someone to keep tabs on her. No mistakes, back in Brooklyn." Aisha stood in her apartment, staring at the photo of Lila. The kiss with Malik lingered in her mind, a reckless spark she couldn't shake. Her phone buzzed with another text from him. "I'm not giving up, Aisha. Let me prove I'm more than a rich kid." She didn't reply, but a small smile crept onto her face. Trouble or not, Malik was getting under her skin. She turned on her stereo. Nina Simone's "Feeling Good" filling the room, and whispered to the photo, "Mom, would you tell me to follow my heart or run from this mess?" The Brooklyn night was alive with sound car horns blaring, the distant wail of a siren, and the low hum of a street performer's saxophone drifting from a corner bar. Aisha Washington and Malik Jackson hurried down Fulton Street, their breaths visible in the cool spring air. Aisha's sneakers slapped against the pavement. Her hoodie pulled tight against the breeze, while Malik's designer jacket flapped open, his usual swagger replaced by urgency. They'd just left the community center where they'd spent the evening sorting books for the reading program when Aisha noticed a man in a dark jacket trailing them, his face half hidden under a baseball cap. "Malik, don't look back," Aisha whispered, her heart racing. "We're being followed." Malik's eyes narrowed, but he kept his voice casual. "You sure could just be some dude heading to the bodega. He's been behind us since we left the center," she said, glancing at a shop window to catch the man's reflection. Same guy, same distance. This isn't a coincidence. Malik's jaw tightened and he slipped his hand into hers, his grip firm. "All right, let's lose him. Follow my lead." They turned sharply into a narrow alley, the kind that smelled of damp concrete and yesterday's garbage. A flickering street lamp cast long shadows, and Aisha's pulse pounded in her ears. She wasn't built for this sneaking through alleys, dodging creeps. She was a kindergarten teacher, not a spy. But the folder of incriminating documents she and Zoe had stolen from James's office, now tucked safely in her apartment, made her a target. Victor Kingsley, the mastermind behind James's scheme, wasn't playing games. "Over here," Malik said, pulling her behind a stack of crates. They crouched low, the alley's chill seeping through Aisha's jeans. She could hear the man's footsteps, now slow and deliberate, getting closer. "Malik, this is crazy," Aisha hissed, her voice barely audible. "What if he's got a gun? Then he's about to meet a guy who's seen every action movie ever," Malik said, flashing a grin that was equal parts bravado and nerves. "Trust me, I got you." Aisha rolled her eyes, but a laugh escaped her, easing the tension. "You're supposed to be a hero, not trip over a trash can." "Hey, I'm saving your butt in style," he shot back, then froze as the footsteps stopped. The man was just beyond the crates, his shadow stretching across the alley wall. Aisha held her breath, her hand tightening around Malik's. Then a stroke of luck. A stray cat darted out, knocking over a bottle with a loud clink. The man cursed under his breath and moved on his footsteps, fading. Aisha exhaled, her knees wobbling, but before she could stand, her foot caught on a crate, and she toppled forward, pulling Malik down with her. They landed in a heap, her face inches from his, the folder she'd grabbed from her bag now scattered on the ground. "Great," Aisha muttered, brushing dirt off her jeans. "Now we're both down for the count." Malik chuckled, helping her up. "You're a mess, Aisha, but you're my kind of mess." She swatted his arm, but her cheeks warmed as they gathered the papers. "Come on, rich boy. Let's get out of here before we end up in a true crime podcast." They slipped out of the alley, blending into the evening crowd. But Aisha's nerves didn't settle until they reached her apartment. Inside, the familiar scent of coconut oil and leftover jambalaya grounded her. She locked the door, double-checking the bolt, and sank onto her green sofa. The papers clutched to her chest. Malik leaned against the counter, his usual cockiness subdued. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. That was intense. "Yeah," Aisha said, rubbing her temples. "But it's not over. Those papers prove Victor and James have been playing me for years. If they're sending goons after me, they're scared." Malik's eyes darkened. "They should be. Nobody messes with you on my watch." Aisha managed a small smile. "Look at you going from party boy to protector. Careful, Malik. I might start liking you." "Too late," he said, winking. "I'm already growing on you." 2 days later, Aisha stepped off a private jet onto a sun-drenched airstrip in the Caribbean, the warm air carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus. Alexander had invited her to his private island, Isla Montgomery, to get away from the chaos and talk about her future. The island was a slice of paradise, emerald hills, turquoise waves, and a sprawling villa with open verandas and teak furniture. Aisha, in a white sundress and sandals, felt like she'd wandered into someone else's life. Alexander greeted her at the villa's entrance, his silver hair glinting in the sun. "Welcome, Aisha," he said, his smile genuine, but tinged with fatigue. "I hope this place brings you some peace." "It's unreal," Aisha admitted, taking in the ocean view, "but I'm not here for a vacation. You said we needed to talk." He nodded, leading her to a shaded patio where a pitcher of mango juice waited. "I've been thinking about your role in Montgomery Enterprises," he said, pouring her a glass. "My health is uncertain. I want to ensure you're protected financially and otherwise." Aisha's stomach twisted. "Alexander, I'm not ready to play CEO. I love my kids, my classroom. That's my world." "I know," he said, his voice gentle. "But even if you never step into a boardroom, you're my heir. That comes with power and danger. Victor's been loyal, but he's ambitious. Your existence threatens his plans." Before Aisha could respond, a staff member approached a woman in her 60s with a warm smile. "Miss Aisha, I'm Eleanor, your father's chief of staff," she said. "May I show you to your room?" Aisha followed Eleanor through the villa, marveling at the open-air design and shelves lined with books and art. Eleanor paused at a door slightly ajar, her expression softening. "This is your father's private study," she said. "He calls it the heart room." "Curious." Aisha pushed the door open and froze. The room was a shrine to her life, walls covered with photos, newspaper clippings, and a timeline pinned with red string. There were pictures of her at a middle school science fair, a high school track meet, her college graduation. A stack of wrapped presents lined one wall, each labeled with her name and a birthday date. 34 gifts, one for every year she'd been missing. "What is this?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling as she picked up a gift marked, "Aisha, age 5. Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Your father never gave up on you. He bought a gift every year, hoping he'd find you in time to give it. The photos, the clippings he collected, every trace he could." Aisha sank into a chair, tears spilling over. She opened a leather-bound journal on the desk, its pages filled with Lila's handwriting. "Aisha, my songbird." One entry read, "You're the best part of me. Live boldly, love fiercely." The words broke something open in Aisha, a flood of grief and love for a mother she'd never known. She didn't hear Alexander enter until he spoke. "I'm sorry if this is overwhelming," he said, his voice thick. "I just wanted you to know you were never forgotten." Aisha wiped her eyes, clutching the journal. "Mom loved me so much. Why didn't I know her?" Alexander knelt beside her, his hand hovering before resting on her shoulder. "You have her spirit, Aisha, her strength. I see it every time you speak." They sat in silence, the ocean's rhythm filling the space. For the first time, Aisha felt a connection to this man, not just as a billionaire, but as her father. That night, Aisha stood on the villa's private beach, the sand cool beneath her bare feet. Her white dress fluttered in the breeze, and the moonlight painted the waves silver. She'd argued with Malik before leaving Brooklyn. He'd thrown a lavish party at the community center, complete with a DJ and catered food without asking her. "It's for the kids," he'd said, but Aisha saw it as another flashy move to impress her. "I don't need your money." "Malik," she'd snapped, "I need you to listen." Now, alone with the ocean, she regretted her harshness. Her phone buzzed and she sighed, expecting another apology text. Instead, it was a photo of Malik stepping off a jet on the island's airstrip, captioned, flew 500 miles to say, "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" Minutes later, he appeared on the beach, his usual designer gear swapped for a simple t-shirt and jeans. His eyes were earnest, no trace of his usual smirk. "Aisha, I messed up," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I thought I was helping, but I should have asked you." "I'm trying, okay? I'm not just some rich kid. I want to be better. For you." Aisha's heart softened, but she held her ground. "Malik, I'm 34. I've been burned before. I can't afford to play games with a guy who thinks life's one big party." "I'm not playing," he said, stepping closer. "You're the realest thing in my world, Aisha. Let me prove it." The air between them crackled the waves, a soft backdrop. Aisha's resolve wavered as Malik closed the distance, his hand brushing her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. She didn't. Instead, she leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a storm breaking. It was fierce, hungry, the kind of kiss that erased doubts and lit fires. Malik's hand slid to her waist, pulling her against him, and Aisha's fingers tangled in his shirt, the fabric soft under her touch. They sank onto the sand, the world narrowing to the heat of their bodies, the rhythm of their breaths. His lips trailed down her neck, leaving a trail of warmth, and she arched into him, lost in the moment. But a shout shattered the spell. "Aisha!" Eleanor's voice cut through the night, urgent. "We need you at the house now." They scrambled up, brushing sand from their clothes, and ran to the villa. Alexander stood in the living room, his face pale, surrounded by security. "Someone tampered with the jet," he said, his voice grim. "The fuel line was cut. If we hadn't caught it, it could have been catastrophic." Aisha's blood ran cold. "Victor," she said the name. A bitter taste. "He's trying to stop me from going back." Malik's arm went around her, protective. "I saw a guy lurking near the airstrip when I landed," he said. "Didn't think much of it, but I got his license plate. I'll call my security team to trace it." Alexander nodded, impressed. "You're more than you seem, Mr. Jackson." Malik met Aisha's eyes, his voice steady. "For her, I'm whatever she needs me to be." The next morning, as Aisha packed to return to New York, a helicopter arrived unannounced. Cassandra Jackson. Malik's mother stepped out, her designer heels sinking into the sand. She was 50, stunning in a tailored blazer, her braided updo impeccable, but her eyes were cold as she faced Aisha. "Malik, we need to talk," Cassandra said, ignoring Aisha. "This relationship is a mistake. She's too old, too poor. You're throwing away your future." Aisha's chest tightened, but Malik stepped forward, his voice firm. "Mom, Aisha's my future. You can keep the money if it means losing her." Cassandra's lips pursed, but she didn't argue. "We'll discuss this at home," she said, turning back to the helicopter. Aisha watched her go, her heart heavy, but resolute. "She's not wrong," she said quietly. "I don't fit in your world, Malik." "You are my world," he said, taking her hand. "We'll figure it out, together." As they boarded the repaired jet, Aisha clutched Lila's journal, her mind racing. Victor's move had raised the stakes, but she wasn't backing down. "They tried to break me once," she told Malik, her voice. "Steal not again." He squeezed her hand, his eyes fierce. "Let's take 'em down, Aisha." The rooftop garden of the Plaza Hotel glowed under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, a fairy tale setting perched high above Manhattan's glittering skyline. White roses and ivy draped over trellises, their scent mingling with the crisp May air. A string quartet played softly, their notes weaving through the murmur of 50 carefully selected guests, board members, investors, journalists, and a few close allies. The scene was elegant, but intimate, a stark contrast to the ostentatious cathedral where Aisha Washington's world had shattered weeks ago. Tonight she stood at the center of it all, radiant in a sleek ivory gown that hugged her curves, her curly hair cascading in soft waves, her brown eyes sharp with purpose. This wasn't a wedding. It was a trap. Aisha had spent the last 2 weeks playing a dangerous game, pretending to forgive James Bennett, the man who'd humiliated her at their first wedding. His desperate texts and lavish bouquets, roses so big they'd taken over her tiny Brooklyn apartment, had given her the opening she needed. With Alexander Montgomery's resources, Zoe Okoye's investigative skills, and Malik Jackson's unwavering support, Aisha had orchestrated this second wedding to expose James and Victor Kingsley, the masterminds behind a 3-year plot to keep her from her billionaire father and control her inheritance. The folder of damning evidence stolen from James's office was now safely with Eleanor Alexander's chief of staff, ready to be unveiled. Aisha stood in a private suite overlooking the garden, adjusting her dress in a floor-length mirror. Zoe, in an emerald green jumpsuit, leaned against the doorframe, her braids pulled into a high ponytail. "You sure you're ready for this, girl?" Zoe asked, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. "You're about to roast James and Victor in front of New York's elite." "That's some boss-level energy." Aisha smoothed her gown, her lips curving into a determined smile. "They thought I was too poor to fight back, Zoe. Tonight they learn I'm richer than they'll ever be, in heart, in guts, in everything that matters." Zoe grinned, tossing her a mock salute. "That's my queen. Let's burn this place down figuratively, of course." A soft knock interrupted them, and Malik Jackson stepped in, looking sharper than ever in a tailored black tuxedo. At 24, he'd shed much of his earlier arrogance, but his deep brown eyes still sparkled with that troublemaker charm. His fade haircut was crisp, and the Rolex he'd once flaunted was gone, replaced by a simple leather band, a quiet nod to Aisha's influence. "Damn, Aisha," he said, his voice low with admiration. "You look like you're about to own the world." Aisha's cheeks warmed, but she kept her tone teasing. "Focus, rich boy. We've got a con to pull off." Malik chuckled, stepping closer. "I'm focused. But after we take down these clowns, you and me got some unfinished business." He brushed her hand, his touch sending a spark through her. Zoe rolled her eyes. "Y'all save the lovey-dovey stuff for later. We've got a show to run." Aisha nodded, her nerves steadying. She took a deep breath, picturing her mother Lila's journal, the words that had become her mantra. Live boldly, love fiercely. Tonight she'd do both. The garden was a vision of understated luxury, with long tables draped in white linen and candles flickering in glass holders. The guests, a mix of corporate titans and media heavyweights, sipped champagne, their curiosity palpable. In the front row sat Margaret Bennett, James's mother, her silver hair pinned in a chignon, her smile smug as she whispered to a board member. Victor Kingsley, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, stood nearby, his sharp features betraying nothing but his eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. Alexander sat a row back, his silver hair catching the light, his expression unreadable, but his presence commanding. Ellen and Robert, Aisha's adoptive parents, held hands, their faces a mix of pride and worry. James waited at the altar, his blonde hair gleaming, his smile practiced but strained. He wore a navy tuxedo, his posture exuding confidence, but Aisha caught the flicker of unease in his hazel eyes as she approached, escorted by Alexander. The quartet shifted to a soft rendition of At Last, and the guests rose, their phones discreetly recording. Aisha's gown shimmered under the lights, each step deliberate, her heart pounding, but her resolve ironclad. Alexander placed her hand in James's, his touch lingering as he whispered, "You've got this, daughter." Aisha squeezed his hand, then faced James, her expression serene, but her eyes burning. The minister, a kindly older man, unaware of the ruse, began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to unite Aisha Washington and James Bennett in holy matrimony. Aisha's pulse raced, but she kept her gaze on James, who forced a smile, his hand clammy in hers. The minister's words flowed vows, love commitment, but Aisha barely heard them. She was counting down, waiting for the moment to strike. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together, the minister said, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The pause stretched heavy with anticipation. Aisha gently withdrew her hand from James's, her voice clear and steady. Actually, she said, turning to face the guests, before we proceed, I'd like to share something with everyone. James blinked, confusion flashing across his face. Aisha, what are you? He started. But she raised a hand, silencing him. Alexander nodded subtly, and 2 security guards moved into position, one near James, another near Victor. Eleanor stepped forward, activating a sleek projector disguised among the floral arrangements. A screen descended, and the first image appeared, an email from Victor to James, dated 3 years ago, instructing him to approach the target, Aisha Washington, and gain her trust. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aisha's voice carried unwavering. Thank you all for coming tonight, she said, her tone calm but commanding. You're probably wondering why I'd give James Bennett a second chance after he humiliated me at our first wedding, calling me not enough for his world. The truth is, I'm not here to marry him. I'm here to expose him and Victor Kingsley for what they've done. James's face drained of color, his smile vanishing. Aisha, this is ridiculous, he said, his voice loud but shaky. Well, what are you talking about? Let's start with this, Aisha said as Eleanor advanced to the next slide. A photo of Aisha at the community center taken long before she met James, with a note from Victor Monitor. Her closely. She must not connect with Montgomery. For 3 years, James courted me, not out of love, but on Victor's orders. They tracked my every move, ensuring I never learned I was Alexander Montgomery's daughter, because that would threaten Victor's claim to Montgomery Enterprises. Victor stood, his face a mask of rage. This is absurd, he snapped. Alexander, control your daughter's theatrics. I think we should hear her out, Alexander said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. He nodded to Eleanor, who displayed a draft post-nuptial agreement giving James control over Aisha's potential inheritance, including a chilling clause about management of assets in case of spouse's incapacitation or death. The crowd erupted in murmurs, journalists scribbling furiously. Margaret Bennett rose, her voice trembling. James, what is she talking about? What have you done? James's composure cracked, his eyes darting to the exits, but a guard blocked his path. These are fabricated, he said, his voice rising. Someone's trying to frame me. Fabricated? Aisha said, her tone cutting. Like the emails where you called me the target, or the financial records showing your company's debts paid off by shell companies linked to Victor. She turned to the guests, her voice steady. They planned to marry me, control my inheritance, and keep me in the dark. When that failed, they tried to sabotage my father's jet to stop me from coming back to New York. Victor's face contorted, his voice a snarl. You have no proof of that. You're a kindergarten teacher playing at power. Malik stood, his presence commanding. Despite his youth, that teacher's got more guts than both of you combined, he said, his voice ringing out. And I've got proof security footage from the island airstrip showing your hired thug tampering with the jet. My team's already turned it over to the authorities. The guests gasped and several board members exchanged alarmed glances. Alexander rose, his silver hair catching the light. There's more, he said, his tone grave. Our forensic accountants have uncovered irregularities in offshore accounts linked to Victor millions siphoned from Montgomery Enterprises over the past 5 years. Victor's composure shattered. "This is a setup," he shouted. "You've orchestrated this whole charade because you can't accept that your daughter isn't qualified to run your empire. I've compensated you generously." "Victor," Alexander said, his voice steady, "but conspiring against my daughter, endangering her life. That's unforgivable." James, seeing his world crumble, tried one last plea. "Aisha, whatever you think you found, it's been misinterpreted," he said, his voice desperate. "I love you. I've always loved you." Victor approached me. "Yes, but my feelings were real." Aisha's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Were they real when you called me not enough at our first wedding? Or did they only get real when you learned I was Alexander's daughter?" She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You don't know what love is, James. Love is showing up, keeping it real even when it's hard. You're just a coward, chasing dollar signs." The guests were openly recording now, their phones capturing every word. A journalist from Forbes leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Malik moved to Aisha's side, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise of support. "You're done, Bennett," he said. "And you too, Kingsley. Game over." Security guards closed in, escorting James and Victor toward the exits. James turned back, his face twisted with venom. "You really were too poor," he snarled, "too poor in ambition to see what we could have built." Aisha's voice was steady, cutting through the silence. "You're wrong, James. I chose integrity over your lies. That's a wealth you'll never understand." As they were led away, Margaret collapsed into her chair, her face ashen, her empire crumbling with her son's disgrace. The chief legal counsel for Montgomery Enterprises stood addressing the crowd. "The board will review these allegations immediately," she said. "Mr. Montgomery has the full authority to designate his daughter as his heir, and we stand by his decision." The tension broke, replaced by a buzz of conversation. Alexander approached Aisha, his eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into a hug. Lila would have loved to see this. Aisha's throat tightened, but she smiled. "Thanks, Dad," she said, the word feeling natural for the first time. Then a surprise. Cassandra Jackson. Malik's mother stepped forward, her expression softer than Aisha had ever seen Aisha. She said, her voice low, "I was wrong about you. I thought you were after my son's money. But I see now you're the best thing that's happened to him." "I'm sorry." Aisha blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you, Mrs. Jackson," she said. "That means a lot." Cassandra nodded, then turned to Malik. "Don't mess this up, son." Malik grinned, wrapping an arm around Aisha. "Not a chance, Mom." The guests moved toward the reception area, where a buffet of soul-food collard greens, cornbread, and fried catfish waited a nod to Aisha's Brooklyn roots. Zoe sidled up, her grin wide. "You just slayed 2 dragons in front of the world," she said. "How's it feel?" "Like I'm finally free," Aisha said, leaning into Malik. "But also, like I need a nap." He laughed, kissing her forehead. "You've earned it, Queen." As the reception unfolded, Aisha and Malik slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden, the city lights sprawling below. The quartet played My Funny Valentine, and they swayed to the music, her head resting against his chest. "We did it," she said, her voice soft. "James, Victor, they're done." "We're just getting started," Malik said, his voice warm. "You and me, Aisha, we're building something real. Age, money, none of that matters. You're my home." She looked up, her eyes shining. "You've grown up a lot, rich boy." "Had a good teacher," he said, winking. They kissed slow and deep, the world fading to the rhythm of their hearts. Aisha felt Lila's words echo in her mind. Live boldly, love fiercely. She was doing just that. The Brooklyn night pulsed with life, a symphony of laughter music and the hum of summer possibility, Fulton Street had been transformed into a vibrant outdoor festival for the launch of the Lila Washington Education Fund, Aisha's passion project, named after her late mother's strings of fairy lights, crisscrossed above the street, casting a warm glow over food trucks, artisan stalls, and a stage where a local jazz band warmed up with a sultry rendition of Summertime. The air smelled of jerk chicken, cotton candy, and the faint salt of the nearby Atlantic. Hundreds of people, families, neighbors, kids from Aisha's school milled about their voices, a joyful cacophony that felt like home. Aisha Washington stood backstage, her heart fluttering with nerves and pride. At 34, she'd been through hell and back, betrayed at her wedding, targeted by a corporate conspiracy, and thrust into a billionaire's world she never asked for. But tonight, in a flowing turquoise dress that shimmered under the stage lights, her curly hair loose and wild, she was exactly where she belonged. The fund, seeded with a generous donation from her father, Alexander Montgomery, would provide scholarships, books, and after-school programs for Brooklyn's underserved kids. It was her way of honoring Lila, the jazz-singing mother she'd never known, and proving that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in impact. Zoe Okoye, her best friend, adjusted Aisha's mic, her braids swinging as she grinned. "You ready to shine, Queen?" Zoe asked, her voice teasing but warm. "This crowd's about to lose it when you hit that stage." Aisha laughed, smoothing her dress. "I'm more nervous than when we took down James and Victor. Singing in front of my kids is one thing. But this, half of Brooklyn's out there. And they love you," Zoe said, squeezing her shoulder. "You're not just their teacher. You're their hero. Now go make Lila proud." Aisha nodded, her fingers brushing the leather journal tucked in her bag. Lila's words etched in her mind. Live boldly, love fiercely. She took a deep breath, the saxophone's wail grounding her, and stepped onto the stage. The crowd erupted in cheers, kids waving handmade signs that read, "Miss Washington Rocks" and "Lila Fund Forever." Aisha's kindergartners, decked out in glittery t-shirts, bounced in the front row, Tiana leading a chant of "Go Miss W, go Miss W." Aisha's heart swelled as she spotted her family Alexander, his silver hair catching the lights, clapping with quiet pride. Ellen and Robert holding hands, Robert's dad jokes probably at the ready, and Malik Jackson, her 24-year-old partner in crime, looking sharp in a tailored blazer, his grin wide enough to light up the borough. "Thank you, Brooklyn," Aisha said into the mic, her voice steady despite her nerves. "This fund is for our kids, our future, and my mom, Lila Washington, who taught me that a song can change the world. Tonight, we're singing for hope, for community, and for every dreamer out there." The band struck up Nina Simone's "Feeling Good," and Aisha's voice soared rich and soulful, carrying the weight of her journey. She wasn't a professional like Lila, but she sang from the heart, each note a tribute to the mother she'd lost and the life she'd reclaimed. The crowd swayed, some closing their eyes, others raising their hands, caught in the magic of the moment. Aisha's eyes found Malik's, and his proud nod gave her wings. As the final note faded, the applause was deafening. Aisha wiped a tear, laughing as Tiana rushed the stage, throwing her arms around her. "You're a superstar, Miss W," the girl squealed, glitter sparkling on her cheeks. "Only because I've got superstars like you," Aisha said, hugging her back. She stepped off the stage, greeted by a flood of well-wishers, parents, colleagues, even the bodega owner who always slipped her an extra coffee. Alexander pulled her into a hug, his blue eyes shining. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick. "Your mother's smiling down on you." "Thanks, Dad." Aisha said the word, now a natural part of her vocabulary. "This means everything." Ellen and Robert joined them, Robert brandishing a terrible pun. "Aisha, You sang so well. You've got the whole borough in a jazz tassie, he said, winking. Aisha groaned, but her laugh was genuine. Dad, you're gonna scare the kids with those jokes. Malik slipped through the crowd, his arm finding her waist. Told you you'd kill it, he said, kissing her forehead. You're my superstar. Careful, rich boy. Aisha teased, leaning into him. You're getting sappy on me, guilty, he said, his grin mischievous. But I'm allowed. The festival buzzed on with kids dancing to a DJ's beats and families lining up for jerk chicken tacos. Aisha and Malik wandered to a quieter corner where a mural of Brooklyn icons, Biggie Jay-Z, and now Lila Washington, adorned a brick wall. The paint was fresh, a gift from Nia Aisha's artist cousin, who'd insisted on adding Lila's face to the pantheon 6 months ago. I was planning a wedding to a liar. Aisha said, her voice soft as she traced Lila's painted smile. Now I'm here with you, my dad, this fund. It's like a dream. I didn't know I had. Malik took her hand, his leather band brushing her skin. You made it real, Aisha, and I'm just glad I get to be part of it. She looked at him, her heart full. Malik had changed so much since their first meeting gone. Was the cocky millionaire flaunting his Rolex, replaced by a man who'd flown across oceans to apologize, stood up to his mother and put his fortune behind her vision. But the road hadn't been easy. Cassandra Jackson. His mother had fought their relationship tooth and nail, calling Aisha too old and beneath their family. The tabloids had been worse, splashing headlines like, Millionaire's May December romance and is she after his money? Even Aisha had doubted her 10-year age gap with Malik, a constant whisper in her mind. But Malik had proven himself not with grand gestures, but with quiet ones, showing up to read to her kids, investing in the fund, and holding her hand through every storm Cassandra had come around after the second wedding, where Aisha's courage and Malik's loyalty shone undeniable. Now she stood across the festival chatting with Ellen, a tentative bridge forming between their worlds. You ever think about the what-ifs? Aisha asked, her voice low. If James hadn't left me, if Victor hadn't come after me, would we be here? Malik shook his head, his eyes locked on hers. Doesn't matter. Every step brought me to you, and I'm not going anywhere. Aisha's breath caught, and she pulled him close, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise. It was soft at first, then deepened, her hands framing his face, his arms wrapping around her waist. The festival faded, the music a distant hum as they stood in their own world, two hearts beating as one. A familiar voice broke the moment. Y'all are cute, but you're blocking the mural, Naya said, her paint-splattered overalls bright under the lights. People want to take pics. Aisha laughed, stepping back. Sorry, Nia. You're gonna have to paint us in next deal, Nia said, winking. But it'll cost you a plate of jerk chicken. As the night wound down, Aisha found herself at a picnic table with her family plates piled high with soul food. Alexander shared stories of Lila's jazz days, his eyes bright with memory. Ellen laughed, recounting Aisha's childhood antics, like the time she taught the neighbor's cat to read. Robert, true to form, dropped another pun. Aisha, this fun's gonna make you the noteworthy star of Brooklyn. Malik groaned, but his arm around Aisha tightened. Mr. Robert, you're killing me with those, he said, grinning. Cassandra, sitting across from them, spoke up, her voice hesitant. Aisha, I owe you more than an apology, she said. I judged you without knowing you, but seeing what you've built, how you've changed my son. I'm proud to call you family. Aisha's eyes stung, but she smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. That means the world. The table fell into a comfortable silence, the clink of glasses and the distant jazz filling the space. Aisha looked around at Alexander, Ellen, Robert, Zoe, Nia, Cassandra, and Malik, and felt a profound gratitude. This was her family, not perfect, but real, forged through pain and love. Malik leaned in, whispering, "You happy, Aisha?" She nodded, her voice soft. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." A month later, Aisha stood in her classroom helping her kindergartners pack up for summer break. The room was a riot of color finger paint murals, alphabet charts, and a new bookshelf stocked with books from the Lila Fund. Tiana handed her a drawing of a butterfly with a crown labeled Queen Miss W. "You keep this. Forever." "Okay?" Tiana said, her pigtails bouncing. "Forever." Aisha promised, taping it to her fridge at home later that night. Her apartment was quieter now. The chaos of the past month settled into a new rhythm. James Bennett was a fading memory. His real estate empire bankrupted his reputation in tatters after the second wedding exposé. Last Aisha heard, he was working as a barista in Jersey. A humbling fall from grace. Victor Kingsley faced criminal charges for embezzlement, his carefully constructed facade crumbling in court. Aisha took no joy in their downfall, only relief that they could no longer hurt her. Malik knocked on her door carrying a takeout bag from their favorite Flatbush diner. "Got your cornbread fix," he said, setting it on the counter. "And a surprise." He pulled out a small velvet box and Aisha's heart skipped Malik. "If that's a ring, you're moving way too fast," she said, half laughing. "Relax," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate necklace with a tiny saxophone pendant. "It's for Lila, to keep her close." Aisha's eyes welled as he fastened it around her neck. "You're too much," she said, pulling him into a kiss, soft and lingering. They ate dinner on her lumpy sofa, the F-train rumbling outside, Nina Simone playing low on her stereo. Malik announced he'd redirected a chunk of his inheritance to the Lila Fund, a move that stunned his board, but felt right to him. "I'm not just a rich kid anymore," he said. "You showed me what matters." Aisha smiled, her fingers tracing the pendant. "We're building something bigger than us, Malik. For Lila, for the kids, for Brooklyn." He took her hand, his eyes serious. "And for us, I love you, Aisha. Age haters. None of that changes it. You're my home. I love you too." She said the words easy, now true. They kissed again, the world fading to the rhythm of their heartbeat, Brooklyn's pulse echoing theirs. The festival had been a turning point, not just for Aisha, but for her community. The Lila Fund was thriving with scholarships already awarded, and a new community center in the works. Aisha and Malik were planning a trip to New Orleans to trace Lila's jazz roots, a journey of love and discovery. Alexander's health had stabilized under a new treatment, giving them time to build their bond. Ellen and Robert visited often. Robert's puns, a constant welcome annoyance. Cassandra, now a regular at Aisha's events, had even started volunteering her walls, slowly coming down. Aisha stood on her fire escape one evening, the city sprawling below the saxophone pendant, cool against her skin. She thought of James's words, "You're not enough," and smiled. He'd been so wrong. She was enough more than enough. Rich in love, courage, and purpose. Brooklyn had taught her that, and so had the people who'd become her family. As the stars blinked above, she whispered to the night, "We did it, Mom. And we're just getting started." Hey, if Aisha and Malik's journey had you cheering, crying, or dancing to that jazz beat, we're not done yet. This story was all about love, redemption, and finding your true worth. Hope it hit you right in the heart. Hit that subscribe button to catch more stories like this and drop a comment. What's your favorite moment from Aisha's saga? Let's keep the Brooklyn vibe alive.